All right, this video is an introduction to loans, and you probably are familiar with loans, but I'm going to just talk through some terminology so that when you actually work out the problems, if you see a word that's unfamiliar, hopefully you will understand what it is, or you can reference your notes. So installment loans is the official name. When you take out a loan, you pay back whatever you borrow in installments, and those installments means you pay every month, you pay every 2 months, you pay every 2 weeks. I mean, it's different installment lengths. So when borrowing money from college, so if any of you, planning on going to college, if you borrow money for college, if you want to buy a car, if you want to buy a house, etc., you're going to need to take out a loan, and you're going to pay that back in installments. And typically they are in every month. You pay monthly on loans. They're equal amounts made at regular intervals, so I might pay $50 every month. And it's determined by how much you borrow and how long you're borrowing. And of course, the interest rate is going to make a difference. So it depends on quite a few things. So that's really what a loan is. All right, so some other important terminology. An installment loan, I kind of talked about this one already, but an installment loan is a loan that you pay back in installments. So in other words, you're going to pay monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, etc. I'm just going to underline monthly because typically they are paid back every month. Amortization is the process of repaying a loan, and I'm not so concerned about that word as to how we're going to use it down here. So an amortization table is a table that will outline the process of repaying back a loan. So every time you take out a loan, the bank will provide you with this amortization table, which lays out every single monthly payment that you make and how much you owe thereafter. So it can be short if you're only borrowing money for a year, or it can be pages upon pages if you're borrowing something for 30 years. Speaking of the time, that's your term. And term is the period of time over which you pay back your loan. So maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 30 years. Principal, and this is a pretty important word, so I'd highlight this. It's the original amount of the loan. So however much you initially borrowed is your principal. I'm going to talk briefly about constructing an amortization table. Most banks will provide this for you, obviously. They use technology to create the table for you. It's not like you would ever do this by hand unless you were just super awesome and wanted to just sit down for 2 hours and create this table. So here's what it's going to look like, and I'm not going to complete this one. Well, actually, I might complete the first row just so you get an idea. So let's say you borrow $1,600 and you're going to make 11 monthly payments of $144.41 and then one final payment of $144.44. So notice they're 3 cents off, and frequently that final payment will be a little bit more, a little bit less, just because of rounding situations, so not a big deal. Your annual interest rate is 15%, and you're always going to see this compounded monthly. That you don't really need to worry about. That's just letting you know that that you're going to be making a payment every month. We'll talk more about that later. Construct an amortization table for the first 4 months. So again, what the bank would do with this loan is, obviously you have 11 monthly payments and your final, so that's 12 months. They would lay out every single month, all 12 of them, each of your monthly payments, how much of those payments goes towards interest and how much of those payments actually get taken off your principal, which is how much you owe the bank or how much you borrowed from the bank. And then you can kind of just see how much interest you're actually giving the bank. So for example, if I take that $144.41 times 11 months and then add on that 12th month, $144.44, that's $1,732.95. Well, I only borrowed $1,600, so you can see that extra money that I'm paying back is clearly interest, right? So here's what you do. You take the balance before your loan, which was the $1,600 loan, okay, and then you're going to pay the bank $144.41 that first month. Well, they don't just subtract it off what you owe. They're going to take some of that money that you pay them, and they're going to keep it. That's called interest. And then whatever they don't keep from here, they're going to subtract off of your loan, and that's going to be your new balance. Okay, so this little formula right here highlight this, underline it, whatever. Interest equals PRT. You're going to take your principal, which is $1,600, times the interest rate, which is 15%, so make that as a decimal, and then times the time, and the time for these is always 1/12. In fact, I'm going to just write this up here. The time is always 1/12 because it's a 12th of a year, every month. And even when you do it down here for the second month, it's still going to be 1/12. And for the third month, it's not going to change. It's always a 12th of a year that when you're making monthly payments. So when I take 1,600 times 0.15 and then divide it by 12, I get $20. Okay, so I can't really squeeze this in here. I'll use a different color and I'll squeeze it in there. So $20 is my interest payment. So that means my principal is going to be my monthly payment minus my interest. So I'm going to take 144 minus 20, which is going to be 124.41. And then my balance after my payment is really going to be my balance before minus my principal payment. So I'm going to take this 1,600 minus this 124.41, and I get 1475.59, and that is my new balance on this loan after the first payment. Okay, then I carry that down here and I do it again. So I'm going to calculate a new interest amount because now this 1,600 has decreased, but otherwise the 0.15 and the 1/12 is going to stay the same each month. And then I continue this pattern. It's not a difficult thing to do, but I want you to understand how it works. So we'll do another example outside of this intro video. All right, lastly, I'll overwhelm you with this awesome formula. So this is how you calculate monthly payments for a loan. Obviously, you do not need to memorize this. So M, the capital M, stands for monthly payment, and it is the only formula in this chapter that has an M in it. So I think it's pretty good for you right now to clarify that anytime you see an M, that should scream at you that you're dealing with a loan, because later you're going to be dealing with savings and whatnot, and you don't want to get confused all these formulas. P is your principal, and I talked about that already, but principal again is how much you, let me change my mind how I want to write that. So how much you borrow. Okay, so the amount borrowed is your principal, so whatever your initial loan amount is. The little I is 1/12 of your interest rate, or your interest rate divided by 12, obviously the same thing. So you're going to replace all this little I and this little I with your interest rate divided by 12. T is your term, and that's in years, and I would highlight this too because every once in a while you might have like 18 months, and then you have to know, of course, 18 months is really 1.5 years, so your term definitely needs to be in years, not months. And then R is your annual interest rate, which is easy, but just make sure that you turn that into a decimal and do it correctly. Every once in a while I'll see people say 7% is 0.7, which obviously is 0.07, so just be really careful, because that should be something that's super easy to, not make a mistake on. Anyway, you're going to watch more videos on how to utilize this, but it's very easy. It looks like monstrous, but you're just going to put in the amount you borrowed, the time here, fill in your little I's with your interest rate divided by 12, and then you're going to dump all this on your calculator clearly, and you're going to get that monthly payment. So it's pretty slick.